building's absolutely stunning. It's like, what is this place? What is this material, right?
It looks like maybe marble, but they've cut it and then they've kind of positioned it in such a way that the grain alternates.
This looks like something aliens would build, like on another planet or something. It's really impressive. It's just so monolithic. Yeah. And then you got the other one over there.
And it's very kind of bunker-like.
Yeah, it's like...
It even has grass on the roof.
Where did they get this idea from? You're right, it does.
Eventually maybe it'll start growing vines down the building. It'll be quite pretty.
But this is like absolutely bizarre. And what is it? Or is it going to be? Because I don't think it's open yet.
No, I don't think it's open yet.
Some kind of museum.
I read something on the side of it earlier. Yes, something from here.
It's a museum. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Hi, so today we are at the Polish Military Museum, Museum Wojska Polskiego. It's going to show us 1,000 years of history, and we're with our friend today from Britain, Jack. All right, so let's take a look at the museum. We're just outside of the museum. It's a brand new building. We have this huge parade square here as well.
That's a lovely crossbow. It's almost as nice as mine.
So how much force would something like that have?
Some of these medieval ones can even have up to 2,000 pounds of force.
Okay.
Mine is only 215.
And how do they keep the stability when they're flying at such a speed?
So you've got a very short bolt,
Yeah.
and it's a lot stronger, it's a lot more sturdily made than an arrow, and it's got a relatively small arrowhead, because any big, especially broadheads with like a wing on them, they start to almost steer themselves.
Okay.
And they start flying around crazy. And traditionally you'd have only two fletchings on something like this instead of 3, because they didn't have anywhere to put in. But if you notice this, it's quite a nice one. It's actually got a copper rail on it, it's got a metal rail. So you wouldn't have any kind of resistance, it would just glide along it nicely, and that'd usually be waxed as well as your arrow would be waxed. And your string would also
But the bolt is wooden or steel or something?
Yeah, it's usually a very, very, very hard wood bolt, made out of like oak or something along those lines. And then you'd have a very.
So the whole arrow would kill a person, not just the head.
It would go straight through.
Yeah.
This would go straight through armour. The armour from this period is quite interesting because they started figuring out different mixes, not just having a thin wooden sheet. So doing things like laminating them with a mix of broken glass and any kind of metal filings they could, and then putting leather over the top of them. And of course they could be quite heavy because of this, but they were also very, very tough to get through. A crossbow like this would still do that.
But do you think a shield like this would stop?
Something like this, no. But this is a bit of an expensive weapon. This wouldn't have been your average infantryman.
Yeah, I see that.
This advanced.
Yeah. But isn't it the same period as the longbow in England?
Yes.
1400s?
These were more of a
Battle of Agincourt, right? This was like 13 or 14?
Yes, but that's the thing, these came in a bit later, and never were particularly in wide use, and in the UK it's a bit strange as well, because our Archduke of Canterbury, actually ended up outlawing them, because he claimed that it was an unchristian weapon, because it enabled somebody with just money, rather than skill, to so easily kill a knight.
Right.
It's too long range and precise for so little work. It's no more accurate than a bow in reality, it's just easier to use.
I kamienne kule, zobacz.
It's actually called crab armor. It was made especially for the hetman of Lithuania, and the armor weighs 47 kilograms.
Whoever wore this was certainly a large lad.
Amazing.
I like this guy though, he looks very happy. He looks just happy to be there. He's almost shedding a tear of joy.
Oh yeah, you're right. What is it?
I've got no clue, but it's got like a large trigger guard on it, and it looks to be some kind of clockwork mechanism.
So now we're in the late 18th century, yeah?
Mm.
And these weapons have evolved, so tell me something about this type of weapon.
So at this point we've moved really over to flintlocks rather than matchlocks.
Right.
And I think
And what's the difference between a flintlock and a matchlock? So a flintlock is holding a piece of flint,
But,
and you have powder on the pan.
yeah, and you see that very small hole into the barrel?
Yeah.
That's where it contacts through, and then it blows your charge and away it goes.
So what was a matchlock?
A matchlock, instead of using a piece of flint which strikes,
Yeah.
you use a piece of like a almost detonation cord but very slow burning.
Okay.
And it's called fused with gunpowder, so it burns very slowly for a long time, and that's what touches to it instead. But you've got to worry about it going out and getting wet and things, whereas
Right.
this you don't.
Much more reliable, yeah.
And these are more of a sort of carbine, like an
Are these rifles already?
I don't know if these are rifles.
These are muskets.
Flintlock carbine. To be honest, I don't know if it'd have to have been rifled because it's such a short thing. Obviously now we know that the quality of the rifling matters more than the length of the barrel, and that's where you can shoot a snub-nosed revolver quite accurately. But this one's an interesting one because before we had rifled bullets, something we also messed with was having hexagonal barrels.
Oh.
And the puckle gun, which is arguably the first machine gun, had this as well. But it's a way of guiding the bullet, so you can get some relatively good effect out of it. The puckle gun, though, was not designed to be rifled that way for accuracy. It was designed so it would hurt more, and it was designed specifically for use against Turks.
Okay. These are what? Cartridges?
Yes, so these are preloaded cartridges for your rifle or your pistol. All you'd have to do is remove the head, pour it in, and ram it down, and away you go.
Everything's basically inside of a little container thing, a little...
So it's like a tactical vest, but from a very long time ago. And I suppose it'd make it a lot easier if you're riding on horseback than having to fumble around with something in your bag. You can just, it's on your chest, ready to go.
Yeah.
And you can almost point your pistol upwards and load it straight in.
Yeah. So every officer is carrying his own pistol, right, and a saber.
It's nice and convenient and lightweight. But I think a lot of cavalrymen and dragoons also carried a lot of things like that. So they could have
Or
more
a
than one
short rifle like this.
Yeah, this is a carbine, so this is traditionally a cavalryman's weapon because
Right.
it's so just nice and easy to wield. 22nd to 23rd on January, so very short.
These are percussion caps.
So the difference is with these, instead of having a piece of flint that strikes a piece of steel to make sparks, you actually have your gunpowder that goes all the way up into this kind of nipple, and then a brass cap goes on top, and it's got almost like the primer of a rifle inside.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
when
it's
you
a
pull-
cap gun that's... The
But-
cap is
Precisely. So
is the initiator.
yeah, and it's nice as well because it means that it's all self-contained. It's
But you had to put the cap in manually, yes?
Ju-
You
just
had to
on the
set
top.
it. Yeah.
So it just fits on the top of that nipple. You'd have had a little brass cap, and every time you fire it, you just swap it. But it's a
But
lot-
we're still loading from the muzzle, right?
Yeah, these are still muzzle loaders. So we still haven't got too far in, but this is a big jump forwards from match.
Which is much faster, yes.
Yeah. We adopted Wesley bullets.
Okay, so this is a...
This is called a Mosin Nagant. This is a Russian military rifle, but they still even get used in. They turn up today in Ukraine. They're a very simple bolt-action rifle. I think they fire
It's a magazine of 3 or 5 rounds, maybe?
I think it's a 5-round magazine. And you've got the same kind of distinctive scope that you still get today on Kalashnikovs.
What's like the one we just looked at?
Yeah,
it's an adjustable sight.
It just moves forwards on these notches.
Right.
And on top of it, you'll have numbers for range.
Yeah.
And you just adjust it for range.
Right. What is it?
That's a Renault FT tank, which is actually really, I suppose you could say, the first modern tank, like you see on the battlefield that we have today with a top turret. And they were great because they were so fast produced for their time. They were a lot smaller than what we were developing and Germany was making. They were better off-road, and the suspension was a hell of a lot more advanced. So they've got more like a bogey and grouser type system. It's very still lightly armoured. The driver actually sits in here, and these handles are how you would actually get in and out. This actually opens outwards. Yeah. And you just have a little field gun.
How many guys going in here?
I think this was a 2-man crew. So you'd have a loader, commander and gunner in the top, and you just have a driver here. Right. And a big old engine. So it was quite a bit of kit for its time. It was very space aged. And then you've got this this big sort of sledge aft, which helps it cross trenches by giving it some room. This is still very, very basic. You wouldn't want to take this on any kind of cobble street because it would just eat the street. Big steel tracks. They didn't make much speed, and against other tanks, they probably wouldn't fare.
And also a very small gun, actually.
Yeah, it's a very small gun. It's a low-velocity field gun, so it's more for anti-infantry work, really, than anti-tank. Okay. You'd be either firing a solid shot or a high-explosive round. Yeah, this is a Renault FT model 1917. But a lot of countries bought into these. So if you see Japan in World War II, a lot of their tanks actually look very similar because they based a lot of their armour off what they bought from abroad, and they did actually buy these.
It's actually a huge wheel, huh?
It's a huge wheel.
Sorry.
I don't know if this is the drive wheel or if the drive is in the aft. But as you can see, also it's got a modern tension keeper, which actually it keeps the track tight, so it's not going to jump the rollers.
Wow, what an interesting magazine.
Yes, so this was, I guess, one of the first banana mags. They were actually hated by everyone that used them, but this was like the French equivalent to a Lewis gun. And the reason they were so hated is because the magazines had constant problems. They were heavy, they were just horrible to shoot. They're very awkward, so you can't shoot this if you're a left-handed shooter, because the magazine's right-hand side sights.
This is what you said, a Mosin rifle, yeah?
Yeah, so this is a Mosin. I think this is both the same model.
That's what we just looked at with that mock-up, yeah?
Yes, it's the same as the mock-up, but here you get a bit better idea of the sights on them.
Right.
But for their time, when they came out, they were a very good rifle, but you've got to remember again, they're late 1800s, and again, they're still being used today, so they do serve well.
And 7.62 caliber.
Yeah, I think it's 7.62 39.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
So it's a lot smaller rifle at cartridge than we had in Britain or in like the 39 NATO. Yeah. I like these swords, very no nonsense. Almost more like a knife. Yeah. No sort of pummel on it.
So what happened after the First World War is that the Russians pushed back. You know, Poland became a country again.
Is this after the
first
Tsar?
1918? Yeah.
Yeah. After
and then the Russians came back to reclaim what had been theirs for 120 years or something. But they got stopped. It was called the Miracle on the Vistula River.
Damn right.
Because they saw visions of the Virgin Mary leading them to victory. And they beat the Reds.
Bloody good. But they had machine guns by this time. It's funny, isn't it? Maxim, both sides were using them.
So now we're in the interwar period. And they're rebuilding their military and their military culture as well. And this is their famous Piłsudski. He became their dictator.
A dictator? I would never have thought of them as a dictator.
Yeah, they did.
But how did they fare in rebuilding?
Well, the thing is, after the First World War, I was just reading about it last night, kind of in preparation for coming here. 30% of the country was ethnic minorities.
So
So they had
Germanic.
no, mostly Russian, Lithuanian, Jews, and about 800,000 Germans as well. Yeah, and they couldn't agree on anything. And he led them to let's say he led them to victory in the First World War. Then he went off the scene, and for 4 years the country was a mess. And he came back as the dictator, as the strongman, and he ruled until he died in 1935.
So he was the sort of strong-handed that bound it all together.
Yeah.
Through hell or high water, just kind of. I respect that.
The Navy, yeah.
Enigma machine.
Yeah.
Printing presses.
A lot of these are basically improvised explosive devices.
Wow.
They were making during the.
Including maybe. Oh, these could have even been. Well, they're actually making full casings, not just dummy grenades.
This is during the Warsaw Uprising. Yeah?
This is during the occupation, it says. So this was all kind of guerrilla equipment.
Yep. And propaganda stuff, yeah.
And that is very.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
Good old stun gun.
But it says it's been gerrymandered. It says here it's been made by the underground, so it's been machined.
That's the thing though. It was already such a gerrymandered machine gun, but
Yeah, it's just a tube. Yeah.
it's just the actual tubes originally. I'm pretty sure these were made out of bedding parts. So the springs they came out of mattresses, and the tubes were made out of bed frame tubes in Britain. And I'm pretty sure that they gave designs pretty far and wide to everyone. But the problem we had with them is they barely worked because the magazines were so temperamental. So out of 10 magazines, you might only have 3 that worked with one gun. So this must have been an absolute miracle, but it turned out so good. It was Canadian. It's interesting, but if you look at the build quality of this and how much something like this T-34, you'll notice that it's all welded together quite crudely. It's difficult to get to anything on them, and they were actually designed to be disposable, whereas these were more designed to be repaired.
Okay.
Even though that's only based on the M3 Lee, which was the predecessor to the M4 Sherman, they just had a lot more forethinking in mind. That's why they converted so many of them over to self-propelled artillery, because we just had to use them somewhere. But these, even though on theory they were a fantastic tank and very advanced, the problem was they were a fantastic tank if they were built right, and they were built so cheaply and to so low standards that often, even if they were hit, the armour would actually just shatter, because there was no such thing as universal heat treating. You can look at the gap on these welds and how large they are, the width of the thumb.
Right.
So very kind of crudely put together and slapped together, but they did work. In Poland, do you have that TV series Rudy about a dog and his crew?
From the Second World War?
Yes.
You're talking about a Polish serial?
A Polish series, yeah.
Yeah. I think they call it 3 Men and a Dog, or
Yes.
4 Men and a Dog, or something like
that.
this.
And it's about a tank crew.
Yeah. And they go around Poland winning the war.
That's it. That small nub there, quite a strange looking bit, it's actually a pistol port. So you'd actually be able to plop that out and put a pistol out and fire and use that as your sights. These spikes roll between the wheels.
Okay, so there's 2 wheels here actually.
Yes, and they're called grousers, and that's what keeps it on. I think this is actually the drive wheel. So on this, unlike that one over there, this actually has the drive in the aft, which means the engine only has to send power to a rear transmission and brake setup. And the front is actually a tensioning wheel, which is spring-based and keeps the track tight.
Right.
So it's quite nice in that way.
Very low riding, yeah?
Yeah, quite low riding, but then you've got a nice big escape hatch here as well.
Right.
I don't again like how it's so far forwards, because obviously.
Well, like in the movies, people lay down and it goes over them, but I wouldn't want this to go over me.
Oh God, no. But if you had like an e-tool and you could prepare beforehand, it'd probably give you a little bit of a... There's a famous story about, again, the anti-tank dogs. When they trained them quite well, but the problem is they didn't use German tanks. So when they were deployed in combat, they usually came back and hit the soft underbellies of their T-34s. And
So this would be always open like that?
no, usually I think this
There
would
would
have
be a hatch, yeah?
It would have a hatch, and the idea is that if again you're in the oh shit the tank's on fire situation,
Yeah,
you
wanna
open
get
the
out pretty
hatch and you
fast.
can, yeah, because otherwise, if you've got the machine gunner radio operator here, he's got no real way to escape other than the driver's hatch, which again is opening into perhaps oncoming fire. It's not really what you want. And they had a small problem. The Germans had the same thing, where because of this design where the turret meets the hull, it creates what they call a shell trap. So if it was to hit the kind of lower cheek of the turret, it would actually direct it in to the armour serum coming from.
Yeah.
So that could actually be a real weak spot for these tanks. Generally around the turret ring and the sides here, it was a lot lighter and you'd be able to more easily penetrate. And the Finnish used that quite a lot with small anti-tank rifle teams, getting nice and close and hitting around here, because you can generally guess where the crew's going to be inside. And you'd carry a log, and the reason for a log being used is you can tie it off to the tracks, and if you're bogged down, you can use it as a way of like ripping yourself out of marshes and bogs. They still use it today even.
Interesting.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So now we're outside of the museum, and the citadel's around here as well, but they have all these random buildings and some random vehicles here.
that looks like a T-55 nestled around about there. Old tank, the T-34. This comes quite a long ways after. This is more Soviet Cold War, a little bit more capable. But yeah, still, we gave NATO a bit of a fright, but still not particularly fightable in the modern sense. Here you would have had your external fuel tanks. It's funny, a lot of them were taken back from Iraq.
These 55s.
Yes, from like into tank museums in private hands. And in Britain, one of them, they were doing a restoration on one, and they found golden bars in the fuel tank.
Nice.
Yeah. I like the brick, which is
Holding up the gun.
A solemn mellow, a solemn melody on spectral horn from battles fought before we were born. Ghostly figures rise in the midnight veil, in spectral array. Their duty calls them to this haunted bay. Under moonlit skies, the spirits call, footsteps of the past in echoing halls, ghostly silhouettes in a phantom parade. Silent sentinels, in darkness they wait, on hallowed ground where the brave once stood. Every heartbeat echoes through the wood. Echoes of a trumpet in misty fields where shadows march, and in misty fields where shadows march and fade away.
What the hell is this though?
Battles long ago, a memory, their whispers haunt the night. Their whispers haunt the night.
What's this? What have we found?
A requiem therion for heroes gone. In the midnight breeze, their valor lives on. In the rustling trees, haunted hearts on sacred ground. Listen close, you'll hear the sound of spectral drums and bugles play, guiding us in their silent way.
I don't understand. Why would they? What would be the purpose?
Shadows linger where daylight dies. Through fog and mist, their solemn cries. In ranks they form under twilight's spell, where whispered tales of valor dwell. Eternal watch in ghostly shroud.
Yeah.
Their whispers more than echoes loud.
It says up here, za wolność wasza I nasza, for our freedom and yours. It says here. It says this is for, it's in memory of the rebels, rebels for freedom.
So this would have been the Home Army, I take it?
No, this is, look, 1834.
Oh wow, yes.
Like I'm saying, 19th century.
Yes.
But they changed it into a nice park.
It's quite lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Driver and possibly another man wearing a shotgun.
So these are all the activities in the 19th century, right? Like Poles trying to express their nationhood.
But it doesn't. Were they repressed quite brutally, or was it some like more demonstrations, protests, sort of?
Well, it's a good question. You have to get pretty deep into the history to. I don't really feel it. To what extent they were going along with it, and to what extent they were not. No, but definitely the Russians didn't tolerate any political dissent, you know? I think that's pretty obvious. So here's the building we're in, so-called Tenth Pavillion. And this was the prison, yeah, like we just saw.
Yes.
That's why they were led from here to this wall, yes.
Out through the gate and then onto the hill where they'd be executed.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. So actually, here we are in the 10th Pavilion. We were walking down here along this wall here. So all of these buildings. This is where the museum is today, the military museum, yes. Oh, here somewhere. But like you were saying, the walls were built in such a way that they could have enfilade fire, right?
Yes, with overlapping fire. I suppose it must have been useful as well, being so close to water, because if you wanted to ship things like cannon shot and things, it'd be easier to do it by water on a ship. You can just offload it and get it through the gates by horse.
Well, isn't it also just a natural
barrier
defense?
as well.
Sure, of course.
So it's very multifunction having it so close to the water.
Sure. Of the January uprising. And Alexander II. Patriotic demonstrations. Conspiracy groups. Some whiskey. Creepy. This is just a prison, yeah? So this is actually a contemporary artist, 1897, Alexander Sochachevsky. And he's showing life under the Tsars, yeah? It's torture, whipping him, yeah? God knows what they're doing up there. All this torture.
Looks like corporal punishment.
Yep. Slave labor. The thing is that the drawings look quite contemporary, but they're like more than 100 years old. Right, so we're going to take a look at the execution path. This is this cobbled road that's going from the 10th Pavilion to the execution gate, and we're gonna, Jacek and I are going to walk the execution path. So moments before you die, you get to think, geez, why don't they make this smoother?
Yeah, you get to have a twisted ankle. Well, it's really done, if we're honest, to piss the guards off. It's a shame there's no loose stones, so you couldn't pick something up and club some over the head with it.
But I never get over it, really, living in this country, and all these terrible things happened.
Yeah.
You know, where you're walking, you know. And
so
in Warsaw, like, so many people just being murdered and stuff.
Not just during the World War II.
The same place where you're sitting having a coffee, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like. But as the Polish friend was, did you believe in ghosts? She said no. So I think that's how you deal with it. You don't believe in ghosts.
Otherwise we'd all be having coffee too.
But like you said, like putting a playground here is a kind of a...
It's the ultimate victory, I suppose.
A kind of a victory, right?
Despite
like survival, right?
In Wales they have a song called Diamo Rohid,
okay.
Which means we're still here.
Okay.
And what it ultimately is all about is despite everyone coming and occupying, we're still here, and I think Poland has that, but a lot stronger. They've been occupied a hell of a lot worse, and they're still here and they're still strong.
Right. Very, what do you call that type of art? Soviet realism?
Very, very sort of Soviet, isn't it?
Realism, it's a style, right?
Mm.
It wasn't Soviet realism, it was social realism.
Yes,
Socialist
it's
realism.
their own, very, very, like, you see it all across.
Basically,
Soviet
basically the
countries.
women are really like chunky and ugly, and the guys are
very
heroic.
square jaws, and
Yeah.
she actually looks very British if you were to ask me.
Right. Oh, something.